Cedric Coward entered the year as a potential breakout candidate, as someone who showed promise during his 2 years at Eastern Washington after starting out at the D3 level, but a shoulder injury kept him out all but 6 games at Washington State this year, though even with that setback, he's had maybe the most dramatic and unique late year draft rise that I've seen. He's got prototypical measurements at 6'5" and a quarter or 6'6" in shoes with a 7'2" wingspan, and his ability to use those tools to guard multiple positions, knock down threes, and finish plays efficiently give him pretty obvious NBA appeal, and it was the reason that he was headed to a place like Duke prior to the rise. Now there's still a decent amount of questions in someone who hasn't played a lot of high level competition, isn't the most polished or experienced creating his own offense, and needs some refining as a defender, but he's someone with a clear path to contribute, and to his credit, has done a lot throughout the process to convince teams to consider him as high as the lottery. Now we'll start on the offensive end, where he has quite a few pieces to like, but most importantly what he can do from 3. He's had an impressive progression as a shooter from someone who was solid at the D3 level and then played as more of a true forward his first year at Eastern Washington, taking only about 3 per 100 possessions, and then from there he hasn't really looked back. He was at 39% the last 2 seasons, including 40% off the catch and heavily increasing the volume. He's got fluid mechanics, he's gotten a lot better at shot prep, and now doesn't need picture perfect standstill situations to convert from 3. He is reliable standing in the corners, but he'll fire in transition on the move. He'll let it go quickly off a DHO or a little pin down or staggered look, and that expansion and comfort has done a lot for him in terms of his NBA projection. Now, I wouldn't expect him to be elite. I think a couple points over league average on a good diet would be the general expectation, but I also wouldn't put a cap on it because he's gotten so much better in a short period of time, and his combine performance backed up what we've seen. So, in the area that matters most for complementary players that aren't bigs, he's shown that he's more than capable.
Price out to Coward. That's here in the background, David Riley expressing that same thing, and there's Coward.
Rebounds. Can't give Washington State is a very good offensive team, and they're giving them multiple opportunities.
Coward
Again, the last thing Bradley wanted to see.
Eastern wants a basket on this possession. They're being aggressive.
Now, while he may not be elite at any one thing offensively, he does show that he can make an impact in multiple ways and has generally been very efficient even though it's been on a lower level. He's got a lot of the pieces that you'd want from an off-ball wing, and I like some of the flashes he's had as a driver, both attacking shifted defenses or a closeout, and also making one move and driving from different starting points, including in transition. He shot around or over 70% at the rim the last couple years, and his combination of big hands to palm the ball, touch, and the ability to play in control and take contact has a lot to do with that. And though it'll surely be an adjustment to NBA length and athleticism, and he's not the most explosive guy, I do buy the sample that we've seen. He's also a solid cutter and mover without the ball, and I think this really would have shined at Duke in a significant way. He didn't have the type of flow or floor spacing in that offense to do it at volume in his college career, but I do think it's there. And then he did a ton out of the post over the years. That's not going to translate in the same way unless he becomes like a star level offensive player, right? But I do think his ability to score efficiently in traffic and expose mismatches is useful, and that's where it'll likely be most functional in the league. So the combination of shooting, efficiency in close as a play finisher with some flashes as a driver make him a pretty compelling complementary piece, even playing at a lower level.
By Coward. Coward. Another. Cedric has 18 points. Make it first half.
Into this one, averaging 13 points per game, 52% from downtown. Coward slashing. Averaging 13 points per game, 52% from downtown. Coward slashing, doing what he does best, taking inside and using his physicality.
He had it
on the floor, by the way.
I think one of these games early in the year he had 4 points and the team won easily.
Well, yeah, it just shows the versatility of this team.
When you talk about defense by Sanford, wow, so much stronger. Spins again, and this time
Howard brings it up. Looking to power his way down low again. Oh, the spin, maneuver. Coward trying to get past block. Now trying to use his body. Just being a bully with the fall away.
Now, I wouldn't call it a full-on strength, but I do think he's a decent enough team playmaker. He makes extra passes, he's solid on entry looks, he makes some plays out of the post. There were a few driving kicks and one-handed looks in these 6 games that were better than anything I saw from him before too, so I wish he had a little more creativity and anticipation here and I'd be more bought in, but even when he's made mistakes, he's generally looking to make the right play, and that's important. And I think we would have seen a big contrast in the passing and assist to turnover ratio this year than we did at Eastern.
Ties the game and now Price. Coward sets up easy. Look there, and it's not again.
The shot here.
Dane Ehrenstrup, it was an illegal screen last time down. See Greg Nixon say he kind of swung his hip out. Coward trying to drop it to Okafor.
Now defensively, he has a ton of upside, and his combination of elite length and a good level of activity and effort make him a super intriguing prospect on this end. I will say there's a little more nuance to this than just looking at the measurables and saying that he's Kawhi or Herb Jones, because he's not, and it's important to make that distinction, but there is a lot there to build with. He's an impressive mover across the court who covers ground quickly, and that combined with his length make him pretty unique at the level that he was playing at. He's fairly active, putting up good stocks rates over the last couple seasons. He'll make a play help side at the rim or see a determined post player and help there in the paint. He's also got the potential to be an absolute pest as a gap helper, and even though the technique hasn't always been pristine, his length allows him a certain room for error to make plays and help that others just can't. Now sure, that margin gets much smaller in the NBA, but it's one of those things that you just can't teach, and you know it when you see it. On the ball, he certainly has the potential to match up with various 2s and 3s, maybe some 4s in time, and use his length to bother players on contests. When he was fully engaged, especially inside the 3-point line, there wasn't a whole lot that guys could do. He can absorb contact in his chest, and he's probably a little stronger in his upper body than he is his lower. And he's also very good recovering to the ball, so those moments where he does get beat, he can usually make up for it in some way. Now again, he is a little rougher around the edges than I think he can get talked about, which we'll detail more here in a second, but the tools, the scheme versatility and activity, and consistent work on the defensive glass gives him more than enough to see him being a very good defensive piece in the league. And in some ways, the fact that he hasn't had the opportunity to get challenged and educated on those higher levels could be looked at as a positive in terms of untapped potential.
Happy that he was not behind the line there.
Here is held accountable from your leading scorer to your walk-on.
Tyson Rose rejected.
1 point for the Braves so far.
Halftime. Connor Dillon in, number 2 for Bradley. With the shot clock running out, that desperation. Hawkeye ball with 6:10 to.
Very quiet. He's got to deliver here down the stretch.
9 to shoot.
3 for 3 from deep.
Richter trying to go in on Coward.
But on the other end,
He has to feel really good about. He hit 4 of 6 threes against Northern Colorado. That came after he missed 13 straight. Steal. Coward drives, lays it in on the other end.
I have a pretty good level of confidence Cedric has enough to contribute, but to me it'll be more about strengthening the areas he's shown positives in to fully establish himself in the league. So we're going to stay here on defense because there's still a good amount for him to improve, and in ways that, like I said, haven't always been at the forefront. The tools are there, he's got solid feel, effort, all those things, but the discipline can't waver. He's often just a beat late off the ball, whether it's navigating screens or playing as the low man, and he can get caught ball watching too. The closeouts and technique and ball screens can be cleaned up. He's not a true elite lateral mover, and there's a handful of times where he overruns and commits to plays, which leads to giving up unnecessary advantages. And though he has those moments where he can make up for it in a big way, the Big Sky is not the NBA. Now I want to be clear, we're still talking about who I believe is a good defensive prospect who wants to be good on this end, and we've also seen many worse defenders become good in the league. There's just a little more chiseling to be done here in order to maximize his gifts, especially because he got robbed of that full WCC sample and won't have that year at Duke. Now the other main area of contention with Ced is his ability to create in a significant way. I think this is the part of his game where we really missed out on the opportunity to see his growth because he was at least going to get those reps. He's made impressive improvements here over the years and has shown some really nice flashes, but for someone that will be 22 as a rookie, even on a unique development timeline, there's at least question in how much of this he can provide. The handle is fine in straight lines, it's functional enough to navigate a pick and roll, but he can't pick the ball up early. He hasn't been shaking people on ISOs and making plays get into the paint, and also doesn't have that experience handling for longer stretches. And I think the bigger question would be just his ability to make quick and correct decisions on the move from there and be able to read the floor at a high level to make plays. So while he doesn't need to do a lot of this to contribute, and I think he already does enough to not be a full-on specialist, I can't definitively say how much else is there given he played mostly low major basketball and was never tasked with a huge share of creation responsibilities. I do like the upside, but when we're talking top 10 or anything like that, I just want to be more certain, though some of these questions may get answered in a workout setting.
On the shot clock, pass to Coward, able to haul that in, now less than 5. Coward, mid-range, baseline jumper is good.
Coward turns the corner, stops on a dime.
That's a pro move.
Back to Coward. 6 on the timer. Off the fake, contested 3-ball. Coward finding room on the baseline.
I don't really have much else to cover in detail here, but because it's just a 6-game sample for anything that happened less than 15 months ago, it's kind of a unique thing to sift through. I did want to dive into the contrast in performance against high-level competition quickly because it did stand out statistically. He's played 8 top 100 quality games in the last 2 years, and in those contests, his true shooting dropped below 50, he shot 8 for 35 from 3, his turnovers jumped, and this year in particular against Iowa, he just wasn't his best. Now it's hard to hold him to that because he was on the incline and actually had pretty solid games against Ole Miss, Cincinnati, and Stanford as a junior, but it's not really like anything that we've seen before. Now there have been plenty of mid and low major guys who didn't have the opportunity to play a lot of top competition and still found success, but not really in the same way as a late bloomer and with the type of role that he had. So you can do what you want with this. I lean towards valuing the other things that are there, but yeah.
Here, blocked back into the basketball game. He's going to drive. He's going to step over, and he's going to be rejected.
Now, like I mentioned at the top, Cedric has had the most interesting pre-draft rise that I've seen. There's still a level of unknown that makes him trickier than he started to get discussed, but I still think he's a top 20 type of talent in this class. Offensively, he'll likely be an off-ball wing, someone who can knock down threes at a good clip and finish plays in close in a couple ways. And because he has those things, he'll potentially be able to grow from there. Defensively, I think he has a better shot at being a playmaker than a shutdown wing. The ground coverage and tools are pretty good, but he's probably a little further away at the point of attack than I could comfortably say that he'll be one of those guys, but he should be able to at least execute different schemes and match up in a couple spots. Like we said earlier, he's one of those guys that the defense and shooting caliber are the true swing factors for him, but of course, if there's anything else that he can provide as a creator, particularly in his handle, that's going to take him up levels. I don't think you come in expecting that, but I wouldn't completely rule it out just because of the intentionality he's had in his work and the development path that he's on. So the hope would be that he's a plus starter on a good team that could max out higher than that, and then I think the tools and shooting give him a relatively high floor as well. Maybe we'll look back at this and say I was being too conservative here and should have seen there being more, but that's where I'm at. Fit wise, I think he makes sense in a lot of places, but San Antonio, OKC, Memphis now, Minnesota if they're still at 17 would make sense, and then Atlanta and Indiana are some others that I like. Now he's a hard guy to compare because there's just so little to reference. Realistically, I think something like a more toolsy Moses Moody to a healthy Vince Williams Jr. makes sense. I know that's a little different than Kawhi and J-Dub, but I like those, and then a little higher end offensively, there's some Devin Vassell there too, but as usual, this is far from a one-to-one thing.
And Levine wanted a foul.
Well, he might pick up.
Paul, Vassell, pump fake, stepping in, and
Vassell.
Cedric Coward has certainly cemented himself as a first-round pick across the league, with some who are much higher on him than that. And to keep it simple, his combo of physical tools, defensive upside, and the ability to knock down the three make him difficult to dislike. Not to mention, he's been exceptionally efficient throughout his career. Now, because we didn't see him excel against higher level competition or create a ton of offense, it's hard for me to be like top 10 high on him, especially because he is older, but he doesn't have many glaring weaknesses. He's an easy character bet who understands he has a long road ahead of him, so considering him in the top 20 is certainly defensible to me.